Hey Dungeons & Dragons community, I love D&D, and 5th edition is my favorite edition. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think we all agree a couple adjustments could make things even better. I've done a series of those adjustments, and I'm providing them to anyone who wants them. There's no cost. Feel free to access them, share them, use them. You will find a link to the document I'm going to be referring to today in the video description down below, so go ahead and take a look at it. There's also going to be a table of contents that's going to go over all the variants I've done so far. In these videos, I'm going to be explaining how these adjustments work and why I made any decisions for the changes I made. Today, I'm going to be going over what I think is the most problematic part of 5th edition D&D, and that is the feats. I like the idea of feats. I certainly allow feats in any game I play. But I think the idea of feats is that they should be a way that we can specialize our character to differentiate them from the other characters we've seen. So if I'm playing a paladin, for example, who specializes in melee combat, I don't want to be like the paladin who specialized in melee combat in the last game. So I would hope that feats would allow me to do that. But they actually do the opposite. If I'm taking feats with my paladin, and I want to specialize in melee, I'm probably going to find myself pushed towards using a polearm, just like the paladin did in the last campaign. And if I'm playing a ranged fighter, and I want to differentiate myself from the last ranged fighter I saw played, I'm probably going to find that feats push me towards using a hand crossbow, even though the fighter who used ranged weapons in the last campaign also used a hand crossbow. And the reason for this is because the feats really reward certain things, and they don't reward other things very well at all. And there's certain combinations that work incredibly well, like mixing Polearm Master and Great Weapon Master, or mixing Crossbow Expert and Sharpshooter. And though I don't mind the fact that that makes martial characters a little more effective in combat, it ends up pushing us to a couple really select choices. Another thing I don't like about the feats as they're written is they are difficult to navigate. I am making a dwarf barbarian, and I'm thinking that this is a character I want to be really durable. Well, going through the feats, I have to know that a feat called durable is not the feat I want. The feat I want is called tough. And it's not like it's easy to navigate 44 different feats in the Players Handbook alone. So if I'm a new player, that is overwhelming and intimidating. And what I was thinking is I wanted a feat system where you could just go to it, and whether you're a new player or an experienced player, you can just think of your concept for the character, and one of the feats is going to describe that concept, and you could take it, and then you could make the character that you envisioned in your head and have it be effective. I wanted feats to be flexible. I didn't want them to nail you down to one certain thing. I wanted character concepts that weren't viable before, that should have been viable. This is fantasy. I can't watch Lord of the Rings, see Aragorn fighting with a longsword and no shield, and think, that's the character I want to play, and I want to be effective like Aragorn was, and have the feat rules prevent me from doing that. So when I did feats, I ended up making way more changes than anything else I've done so far. And that's a little intimidating because when I look at my variants so far, the things I've made the least amount of changes for got the least amount of downvotes. Because ultimately, anytime you change something, some people think you went too far, some people think you didn't go far enough. I had comments on my video last week saying that I had made humans way too powerful. I had comments on my video last week saying I had made humans way too weak. All that was required was for me to make changes to the human, and then we are going to have some viewers who are unhappy with those changes, and I guess that's unavoidable. And there are going to be a lot of changes today, so I'm ready for it. But the changes I've made to the feats today, I think, are exactly what I wanted. And this is the game I want to play, and this is the game I think people will have fun playing. So if a few people don't like them, well, I'll tell you what. If you don't like these feats, you can play with the Players Handbook feats, and it's not going to affect any of my other variants. So if what I presented today doesn't appeal to you, ignore it. And if you don't play with feats now and you still don't want to play with feats after you've heard about this, keep doing that. That's not a problem. Feats remain an option. My intent is not to make feats a standard. They remain an optional rule. But here's what I do recommend. If you're going to use my rules for feats, then they are intended to completely replace the Players Handbook feats. And if you want to keep the Players Handbook feats, don't use these ones at all. This is a bit of an all or nothing thing. But my goal going into feats was to have it so that there would be a much smaller selection to choose from. But each of those feats would be customizable and they would describe exactly what they do. So if you have a character that wants to use a one-handed weapon and no shield, you can look at the feats. It'll be very clear what feat you need to take, and then you can take it and it will do exactly what you think it should do and bring that character concept you envisioned in your head to life. So all that being said, let's get started. So these are feats, the Treantmonk variant, and we begin with just the basic rules on feats. So, as before, a feat represents an area of expertise that gives a character special capabilities. It embodies training, experience, and abilities beyond what a class provides. At certain levels, your class gives you the ability score improvement feature. Using the optional feats rule, you can forego taking that feature to take a feat of your choice instead. You can take each feat only once, and I want to stop there for a minute because the way I've presented feats, they're going to be customizable, and you're going to be looking at it, and you're going to say there's a lot of options there, and I want to have them all, so I want to take that feat more than once. My intention is that the rule regarding the restriction on taking a feat only once remains. The idea here isn't to give you everything. The idea is to allow customization and a unique character. So you take the 3 features you like the best, and then the next person who plays and takes that feat might take 3 different features. You must meet the prerequisites specified in a feat to take that feat. If you ever lose a feat's prerequisite, you can't use that feat until you regain the prerequisite. For example, the Savage Combatant feat requires that you have a strength of 13 or higher. If your strength is reduced below 13 somehow, perhaps by a withering curse, you can't benefit from the Savage Combatant feat until your strength is restored. Whenever you choose a feat, you may pick any 3 of the features listed. Whenever you gain a level, you may change one of those selections. And the feats are listed below. So all the feats have several options. You can choose any 3 of them when you select the feat, and you can only select the feat once. So whatever you don't select, you don't have. But when you level up, if you change your mind, and there was a feature that you didn't think you wanted before, and now you do want it, or maybe there's a feature you did want, and now you don't want it anymore, you can make those changes. Now, although all the feats are significantly bigger, I will say that it should be easier to navigate, because instead of the 44 feats presented in the Player's Handbook, we're only going to have 17 feats featured here. Now, one thing I got rid of was the kind of feats that we sometimes refer to as half feats. They were feats where you got a +1 to an ability score and then something small. Those don't exist anymore, but I have included a variant you can use if you like. The half feat variant. Your Dungeon Master may allow you to forgo 2 of your 3 feature selections from any given feat to instead receive a +1 to an ability score of your choice. Now, the reason why I've included this as a variant rather than as a base rule is because there are combinations here that I think a Dungeon Master needs to consider before allowing it. For example, if you are playing a Mountain Dwarf and you forgo your +2 Constitution modifier to get a feat at level 1, if we were to use the half feat variant, you could potentially get a +1 bonus to your strength, thus giving you a total of +3 for your starting strength score, which means you could get an 18 strength at level 1. Now, is that a problem? I'm not sure it's a huge problem, but I do think it's something a Dungeon Master needs to be aware of before they allow, and also, I don't think it's necessary. These feats are intended to be big, and they're intended to be instead of increasing your ability scores. Now, I understand if you have an odd ability score, you want a feat. but maybe you have two odd ability scores, and maybe you want to raise them both. So honestly, I don't think this variant is necessary, but I wanted to include it in case it's something you wanted in your game. So now let's just go through the feats together. And what you should see with these feats is the name of the feat should describe exactly what it does. If you have a certain concept for your character in mind, the feat name should speak to you so that you know exactly what it is you need to take. And then the features all fit within the idea of the name of the feat. And you will pick 3 of them, and that's going to leave a lot of features that you probably wanted that you're not going to get. You're only going to get to pick the 3 that fit your concept of your character. And we begin with a very basic one, Armor Specialist. We know exactly what this is going to be. You've studied the use of armor, and you've improved your ability to use armor effectively. So if you have a character and you want to be better with armor than you are right now, whether you're a character that doesn't use armor at all right now, or you're a character that uses heavy armor and a shield already, Armor Specialist is the feat you are looking for. So you're going to pick 3 of these features. Number 1, you gain proficiency in light armor. Number 2, when wearing light armor, which you are proficient in, and you're damaged by a melee attack, you can use your reaction to move 5 feet in any direction without provoking an opportunity attack. Number 3, you may wear a chain shirt or hide armor as light armor for the sake of determining proficiency. When wearing a chain shirt or hide armor, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your armor class if you have a dexterity of 16 or higher. Number 4, you may gain proficiency in medium armor. You must be proficient in light armor through a source other than this feat to choose this feature. Number 5, wearing medium or heavy armor which you are proficient in doesn't impose disadvantage on your dexterity stealth checks. Number 6, when you wear medium armor you are proficient in, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your armor class if you have a dexterity of 16 or higher. Number 7, you gain proficiency in heavy armor. You must be proficient in medium armor from a source other than this feat to choose this feature. Number 8, while you are wearing heavy armor you are proficient in, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that you take from non-magical weapons is reduced by half your proficiency bonus, rounded up. Number 9, you may ignore the minimum strength requirement of heavy armor you are proficient in. And number 10, you gain proficiency in shields. So 10 options, you can select 3 of them. A lot of them are really obvious. Gaining proficiency in armor, gaining proficiency in shields. A lot of them existed before, like not imposing disadvantage on stealth checks. There's some new options here. I want to just quickly go through why I made them. With the wearing light armor you're proficient in and being able to move, I wanted just something special for light armor. There's nothing special for light armor in the base rules. What if you are a rogue and you don't want to wear medium armor? You like wearing the light armor, but you want to be really good at it. Armor Specialist is a way you can do something unique with that. With the chain shirt or hide armor as light armor, I have to admit, in previous editions, you could use a chain shirt as light armor, and I kind of like that. I wanted to include it at least as an option if you wanted it. Another thing you might notice is that the heavy armor specialist that used to get 3 reduced from all attacks now gets half their proficiency bonus rounded up. And the reason for this is because at level 1, that was a problem. Because sometimes you're only taking 3, 4, or 5 points of damage on an attack, and it would reduce half or more of the damage you took. So I thought it should scale with your level, so that it is going to be of similar effectiveness at low level than it is at high level. But that's Armor Specialist, so when you take it, you're going to take 3 selections, and if you want to change those selections as you level up, you can do so. You'll also notice that I have limited your ability to advance your armor proficiencies. So if you are taking light armor with this feat because you don't have any armor proficiency, you can't also take medium armor and heavy armor all with the same selections. We don't want to have it so that you can get all of that with one selection. So if you are a wizard and you don't use armor at all and you want to use plate mail, you're going to at least need to be able to find a way to get medium armor proficiency, which you can do easily with a multi-class, so that you can get your heavy armor proficiency through this feat. The next feat we're going to talk about is Battle Magic. This does exactly what you think it would do. You are a caster. You use spells in combat. Battle Magic is the feat for you. The prerequisite, the ability to cast at least one spell. Your magic has been honed to use in combat. Your quick thinking and specialized training provide certain advantages while fighting with spells. So these are your options. Number 1, choose one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder. Spells you cast ignore resistance to damage of the chosen type. You may select this feature more than once with your 3 selections. If you do so, choose a different damage type. Number 2, when you roll damage for a spell you cast, you can treat any 1 on a damage die as 2. That's any damage spell you cast. Number 3, whenever you make a ranged spell attack, the range of the spell or effect is doubled. Number 4, your ranged spell attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. Number 5, before you make a ranged spell attack, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. Number 6, you have advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain your concentration on a spell when you take damage. Number 7, you can perform the somatic components of spells even when you have a weapon or shield in both hands. And number 8, when a hostile creature's movement provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can use your reaction to cast a spell at the creature rather than making an opportunity attack. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target that creature. So most of these features are basically taken from a number of different feats that already existed. One that is different is before you make a ranged spell attack, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to get the bonus to damage. Remember, this is only applying to spells that require an attack roll, but it is also applying to anything that uses a ranged spell attack. This means now a warlock using the Treantmonk variant that everyone was complaining because, of course, I had made Eldritch Blast a class feature. Well, Eldritch Blast does qualify here because it uses a ranged spell attack. So the idea is, if your character concept is a character that uses spells as a ranged combat technique, you can use that and your effectiveness will be comparable to somebody who uses a bow. Certainly with Eldritch Blast you will be. With other spells and cantrips, remember, we're not necessarily getting extra attacks, so we're not going to see the same benefits that we would see with something like a melee weapon or a ranged weapon, but it does close that gap. So if your character concept is somebody who uses cantrips in combat, then you can at least do so in a way that is going to be somewhat effective. But if that's the way you want to go, if you want to go offensive with this feat, remember there are a lot of features here that you probably want that you're not going to be able to select. You want to have advantage on those Constitution saving throws? Well, that's a feature you're going to have to select. That means that's another feature you can't select. So you have to kind of choose. Am I going to go more offense or am I going to go more defense? And again, it's going to kind of force you to specialize. And that's the point of a feat. It's supposed to specialize your character in a unique way. Then we get into the next one, Dual Weapon Specialist. A lot of people are going to be wondering about why I didn't touch 2-weapon fighting in the Players Handbook, and the reason I didn't touch it is because I decided to take the rules as written and see if I could make them effective as a feat for 2-weapon fighting. And I think I've done that. You are a master fighting with 2 weapons at once. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing 2-weapon fighting. So you're going to select 3 of these features. Number 1, you can use 2-weapon fighting even when the one-handed melee weapons you are wielding aren't light. So taking Dual Weapon Specialist doesn't automatically mean you're going to be pushed into using non-light weapons. It's just one of the options. Number 2, you gain a +1 bonus to armor class while you're wielding a separate melee weapon in each hand. Number 3, whenever you use your interact with an object to draw or stow a weapon, you may do so with 2 one-handed weapons at the same time. Number 4, you may use your bonus action to make an attack with your offhand weapon on your turn as long as you made a weapon attack with your primary weapon, even if you didn't take the attack action. So this opens up all kinds of stuff. Like, for example, you're using Booming Blade, but you wanted to be a 2-weapon fighter? Well, you can do that now. Number 5, when you use a bonus action to attack with your offhand weapon, you may make an additional attack with that weapon if you made more than 1 attack with your primary weapon on that turn. And this is the big one. Obviously, one of the huge problems with two-weapon fighting is it didn't scale. So you had a character that got one attack, and getting one additional attack with an offhand weapon on the condition that both weapons were lighter and less effective was an okay trade. But the moment you get extra attack, and especially if you get more than one extra attack, that gets worse and worse and worse. So now we're going to scale it a bit. So you can make up to 2 weapon attacks with your bonus action using your offhand weapon. Now, this isn't going to stack well if you do something like with a booming blade and an offhand weapon there. So I've thought about the ways that this might be combined in a way we don't want, and made sure that didn't happen. And finally, you gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. This is a selection that most people won't choose, but it's there if you need it. Because in the Player's Handbook, there is a feat that gives you 3 martial weapon proficiencies. It's an entire feat. Now we're going to have it as one selection on a feat. So if you do need a weapon proficiency that you don't have, you can select it through the feat. Though I imagine most people who take this feat won't need that selection. Again, this feat does exactly what you would think it would do. You wanted to make a 2-weapon fighter, now you can. And there's new options open to you, and you are going to be more effective than you ever had been before. Then we have Educated. As you might imagine, Educated isn't really a combat feat. It does exactly what you think it would do. You've studied with a capable teacher, or at a college, perhaps learning lore, languages, or perhaps learning other skills through a mentor. And here are your options. Number 1, learn 3 languages of your choice. Number 2, you can ably create written ciphers. Others can't decipher a code you create unless you teach them, and succeed on an intelligence check, or they use magic to decipher it. Number 3, gain proficiency in a skill in which you are not proficient. Number 4, gain proficiency in 3 sets of tools for which you are not proficient. And number 5, gain expertise in a skill or a set of tools for which you are proficient. So you want to be more skilled, you want to improve the skills you already have, you want to learn languages, you want to learn tools. Obviously, Educated is the feat you would want. Now, sometimes you play a character that doesn't have magic, but you would like to at least dabble without having to multiclass. Well, then the feat for you is magical training. You have learned the basics of magic, either through a teacher or through your own initiative. This has given you rudimentary magic skills and or the training to deal with spellcasters. And here are your options. Number 1, choose 1 first-level spell from any spell list. You learn that spell and can cast it at its lowest level. Once you cast it, you must finish a long rest before you can cast it again using this feat. You use the same ability score as the class from which you have chosen the spell. This is obviously based on the Magic Initiate feat, but what we have done is we've opened up all classes. So you can choose a Paladin spell, you can choose a Ranger spell. The next choice is choose 2 cantrips from any one spell list. You may cast those cantrips using the same ability score as the class from which you chose those cantrips. The third, you may gain the ability to cast 2 first-level spells of your choice as rituals. Choose one of the following classes: Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard. You must choose your spells from that class's spell list, and the spells you choose must have the ritual tag. The class you choose also determines your spellcasting ability for these spells: Charisma for Bard, Sorcerer, or Warlock, Wisdom for Cleric or Druid, or Intelligence for Wizard. Number 4, you have learned to cast wizard rituals from a ritual book you possess. If you come across a wizard spell in written form, such as a magical spell scroll or spellbook, you might be able to add it to your ritual book. The spell must be no higher than half your level rounded up, and it must have the ritual tag. The process of copying the spell into your ritual book takes 2 hours per level of the spell, costs 50 gold piece per level. The cost represents material components you expend as you experiment with the spell to master it, as well as the fine inks you need to record it. Intelligence is your spellcasting modifier for these spells. Number 5. When a creature within 5 feet of you casts a spell, you can use your action to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. If the attack hits, the spell is lost. Number 6. When you damage a creature that is concentrating on a spell, that creature has disadvantage on the saving throw it makes to maintain its concentration. And number 7. If you have the spellcasting focus feature from a class you have levels in, you may use that focus in place of a material component for spells gained from other sources, such as multiclassing, feats, etc. So this will allow you to take a non-magical character, and give them a little bit of magic, or it will allow you to take a magical character and allow them to dabble in a different kind of magic in an effective way. Finally, it's going to give that martial character that little bit of knowledge of magic that's going to make them more effective against fighting against spellcasters. Now, I envision my character as a quick, agile character, able to react to situations very quickly. Then I want fast reactions. The prerequisite here is a dexterity of 13 or higher. You are especially quick and nimble, and this provides you with benefits in your movement and reactions. And your choices are, number 1, when you are prone, standing up uses only 5 feet of your movement. Climbing doesn't cost you extra movement. You can make a running long or high jump after moving only 5 feet on foot rather than 10 feet. Number 2, you gain a +5 bonus to initiative. Number 3, you can't be surprised while you are conscious. Number 4, other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. Number 5, your speed increases by 10 feet. Number 6, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement. And number 7, you may take the disengage action as a bonus action. So all these ones actually fit really nicely with fast reactions. If you want to make that character that's quick on their feet, quick to react, fast reactions is obviously what you're looking for. The next feat we're going to talk about is the Mounted Combat Specialist. Mounted Combat did not get a lot of love in 5th edition. And I wanted to give it some love because I think Mounted Combat is an interesting character concept. You want to make a knight, you want to use a lance. Well, I think that the rules should allow you to do so in an effective way. Doesn't have to be that every campaign has that kind of character, but it would be nice to at least have that option. So what it does is you are a master fighting while mounted. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when fighting on horseback or another applicable mount. So choose 3 of the following selections. Number 1, you can have advantage on melee attack rolls against any unmounted creature that is smaller than your mount. I like having this as an option rather than as a basic feature of mounted combat because some of our characters are small characters. I love playing a halfling. I want to be able to choose different selections than that selection because it doesn't do me any good. But if I am playing a medium-sized character on a horse, I would expect a lot of enemies I fight are going to be smaller than me, and I can really benefit from that. Number 2, you can force an attack targeted at your mount to target you instead. Number 3, if your mount is subjected to an effect that allows it to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, it instead takes no damage if it succeeds on the saving throw, and only half damage if it fails. It may use your saving throw modifier if it is higher. Number 4, if your mount moves at least 10 feet towards an enemy on your turn, and you use the attack action to attack that enemy with a lance, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. If you hit with your initial attack and you have the extra attack feature, you may forgo your second attack, and the hit is considered a critical hit, and the enemy is knocked prone. Number 5, if your mount is controlled, it is not restricted in the actions you can have it make. Normally, a controlled mount is restricted to the dodge, dash, or disengage action. I know players who are disappointed that a controlled mount can't attack. You can't use the hoof attacks because in previous editions you've been able to, and they like that idea. I don't think it's necessary, but it is one option. We're going to open it up for you. And finally, number 6, you gain proficiency in the lance and 2 other martial weapons of your choice. So I think that does exactly what you would think it would do, and it gives you some options. You can choose more defensive options, you can choose more offensive options. And that brings us into Ranged Combat Specialist. Obviously, this does exactly what you think it would do. You are a master in the art of ranged attacks in combat. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when using weapons that attack at range. So you're going to choose 3 of these selections, and you're going to notice a certain combination no longer exists. So number 1, you ignore the loading property of ranged weapons for which you are proficient. Number 2, being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. When you use the attack action and attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a one-handed ranged weapon you are holding. This does open up. We're not just restricting to hand crossbows here. Number 3, attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls, and your ranged weapon attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. Number 4, Before you make a ranged attack with a weapon that you are proficient in and holding in 2 hands, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. Number 5, you may draw weapons with a thrown property as part of the attack with that weapon. And number 6, you gain proficiency in 3 ranged weapons or weapons with the thrown property. Now you might notice here that a combination that existed before no longer exists. Before, of course, you would take a hand crossbow and combine it with sharpshooter and crossbow expert. You could get a bonus action attack, and on top of that, you could do the -5 to hit plus 10 damage. Now what we're doing is with one-handed ranged weapons, you can get that bonus action attack. With two-handed weapons, you can get that damage bonus, but you can't combine them anymore. What this does is it is going to make you better in whatever kind of ranged weapon you use. Whether it is a one-handed ranged weapon, whether it is a two-handed ranged weapon, whether it is thrown weapons. But what it's not going to do is it's not going to push you in one direction or another. The next feat is Savage Combatant. This again, exactly what you think it would be. Your prerequisite, strength of 13 or higher. You are a crazed attacker on the battlefield. Your bloodlust has granted you certain advantages while fighting with unmatched zeal. And we're going to have 5 options here. Number 1, when you take the dash action and end your movement within range of a target with a melee weapon you are holding, you may make the attack action as part of the same action. If you choose to shove a creature with the attack action gained as part of a dash, you may choose to shove a creature up to 10 feet and knock them prone with the same shove attack. Number 2, you are proficient with improvised weapons and your unarmed strikes deal d4 for damage. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or an improvised weapon on your turn, you can use a bonus action to attempt to grapple or shove the target. Number 3, you may use a bonus action to grapple an opponent that is prone. Number 4, you gain proficiency in athletics. If you are already proficient, you gain expertise. And number 5, once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee weapon attack, you can choose to do maximum damage with that weapon's damage dice rather than rolling for damage. If you are adding additional dice to the damage roll, such as after scoring a critical hit or with a sneak attack, those dice are rolled normally. So when we take the Savage Combatant feat, we're turning our character into a charger, we're turning them into a crazed combatant, a brawler, we're turning them into a grappler, or we're increasing the force in which they attack with their weapons. Again, Savage Attacker should make it clear what you're going to get here. The next feat is Sharp Intellect. Your mind is always working, allowing you to notice the finer details, remember the relevant facts, the speech and mannerisms of others, and you process your thoughts quickly. And you will choose 3 of. Number 1, you always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset, and you always know which way is north. Number 2, you can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. Number 3, if you can see a creature's mouth while it is speaking a language you understand, you can interpret what it's saying by reading its lips. Number 4, you have advantage on intelligence investigation checks. And number 5, you can mimic the speech of another person or the sounds made by other creatures. You must have heard the person speaking or heard the creature make the sound for at least 1 minute. The successful wisdom insight check contested by your charisma deception check allows a creature to determine the effect is faked. And that brings us to a feat that is very different from anything we've seen in the Players Handbook, Single-Handed Weapon Specialist. This is going to open up doors for iconic characters in fantasy in Dungeons & Dragons. You are master of fighting with one-handed melee weapons and versatile weapons. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing these weapons. And you will choose 3 of the following 6 selections. Number 1, when you use a melee weapon one-handed and nothing in the other, it's treated as having the finesse property. This is going to open up long swords for rogues, hooray! Number 2, before you make a melee attack with a weapon that has the finesse property that you are proficient with, and you are holding nothing in your other hand, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, the target of the attack has disadvantage on the next weapon attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. Number 3, when you are wielding a finesse weapon which you are proficient and nothing in your other hand, and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class for that attack, potentially causing the attack to miss you. Number 4, before you make an attack roll with a melee weapon while using the versatile property, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. Number 5, before you make an attack roll with a melee weapon that has the versatile property and holding nothing in your other hand, you may make a one-handed attack as if the weapon had the reach property. I was thinking of ways to make the versatile weapon property interesting in the hands of a character using it, and I watched some YouTube videos on tactics using longsword, and I noticed that that was one of the things you could do, is use that long handle to improve your reach. And number 6, you gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. So if I am playing one of the most iconic versions of a melee character in fantasy, the character that uses a sword and no shield, this is the feat for you. Then we get to Skulker. You are an expert at skulking and scouting in dangerous locations, like dungeons, dark hallways, in an enemy lair, or caverns. 8 choices here. Number 1, you gain proficiency in the stealth skill. Number 2, you can try to hide when you're lightly obscured from the creature from which you are hiding. Number 3, when you are hidden from a creature and miss it with a ranged weapon attack, making the attack doesn't reveal your position. Number 4, dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks relying on sight. Number 5, you have advantage on wisdom perception checks relying on sound. Number 6, you have advantage on saving throws made to avoid or resist traps. Number 7, you have resistance to the damage dealt by traps. And number 8, traveling at a fast pace doesn't impose the normal -5 penalty on your passive wisdom perception checks. That brings us to the next feat, Survivor. You have a knack for surviving the most harrowing of situations, and you have a talent for keeping those in your care alive. There are only 4 features here, but some of those features you can select more than once. The first is when you use a healer's kit to stabilize a dying creature, that creature also regains 1 hit point. Number 2, as an action, you can spend 1 use of a healer's kit to tend to a creature and restore 1d6 plus 4 hit points to it, plus additional hit points equal to the creature's maximum number of hit dice. The creature can't regain hit points from this feat again until it finishes a short or long rest. Number 3, you can spend 10 minutes inspiring your companions, shoring up the resolve to fight. When you do so, choose up to 6 friendly creatures, which can include yourself, within 30 feet of you that can see and hear you and who can understand you. Each creature can gain temporary hit points equal to 1/2 your level. A creature can't gain temporary hit points from this feat again until it's finished a short or long rest. If you select this feature twice, the temporary hit points are equal to your level. If you select this feature 3 times, the temporary hit points are equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. In the final selection, you have a luck point. Whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can spend the luck point to roll an additional d20. You can choose to spend your luck point after you roll the die, but before the outcome is determined. You can choose whether to use your roll or the initial result. You can also spend your luck point when an attack roll is made against you. Roll a d20 and then choose whether the attack uses the attacker's roll or yours. If more than one creature spends a luck point to influence the outcome of a roll, the points cancel each other out. No additional dice are rolled. You regain your expended luck point when you finish a long rest. You may select this feature more than once. So that's like the lucky feat, but you don't necessarily get 3 luck points, but you can get 3 luck points if that's all you want here. Our next feat is Tactician. In combat, you are careful and you employ enhanced tactics that make you especially deadly. Number 1, you learn a maneuver of your choice from those available to the Battle Master archetype in the fighter class. If a maneuver you use requires your target to make a saving throw to resist your maneuver's effect, the saving throw equals 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your strength or dexterity modifier, your choice. You gain 1 superiority die, which is a d6. This die is added to any superiority dice you have from another source. This die is used to fuel your maneuver. A superiority die is expended when you use it. You regain your expended superiority dice when you finish a short or long rest. You may select this feature more than once. Each additional selection provides 1 additional maneuver known and a d6 superiority die. Number 2, when you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. Number 3, creatures provoke opportunity attacks from you even if they take the disengage action before leaving your reach. And finally, when a creature within range of a melee weapon you are holding makes an attack against a target other than you, and that target doesn't have this feat, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against the attacking creature. That brings us to our next feat, Tough as Nails. Should be clear what this does. The prerequisite here is a constitution of 13 or higher. You are especially hardy. You are wounded less and irrepressible even when wounded, recovering with surprising speed. We have 5 selections here. Number 1, your hit point maximum increases by an amount equal to your level when you gain this feat. Whenever you gain a level thereafter, your hit point maximum increases by an additional 1 hit point. You may select this feature twice. If you do so, you gain twice the benefit. Number 2, when you spend hit dice to recover hit points, instead of rolling, you heal the maximum possible result. For example, if a cleric, D8, spends 2 hit dice on healing, they automatically regain 16 hit points plus their modifier for con for both dice. Number 3, you make any saving throw to prevent your hit point maximum from being lowered with advantage. Number 4, you do not suffer exhaustion when you fall to 0 hit points. Remember, this is from my variant last week. If you fall to 0 hit points, you gain a level of exhaustion. We can avoid that with a feat. And number 5, you gain proficiency in saving throws in the ability score of your choice. Now we're rounding down to the end here. We have Two-Handed Weapon Specialist and Weapon and Shield Specialist. So we'll begin with Two-Handed Weapon Specialist. The prerequisite here, strength of 13 or higher. You are a master of fighting with a weapon held in 2 hands. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing a weapon this way. 5 selections here. Number 1, before you make an attack with a melee weapon you are holding in 2 hands, you can choose to forego your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. And I should mention here, notice there are lots of features that allow you to forego your proficiency modifier. If you forego your proficiency modifier, it's gone. So if you have 2 different features from, say, 2 different feats that allow you to forego your proficiency modifier, you can't forego your proficiency modifier more than once. I think that should be obvious, but I just want to clarify. You can forego your proficiency modifier, but you can't forego your proficiency modifier twice. Number 2, on your turn, when you score a critical hit with a weapon or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with one, you can immediately make 1 more melee weapon attack. You may only benefit from this feature once on your turn. Notice this no longer uses your bonus action. Number 3, when you take the attack action and attack with a melee weapon you are holding in 2 hands with the benefit of your proficiency modifier, you can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with another part of the weapon. This attack uses the same ability modifier as the primary attack. The weapon's damage die for this attack is D4, and it deals bludgeoning damage. Notice here the inclusion of the phrase with your proficiency modifier, which means if you forego your proficiency modifier, you can't use this feature. Again, you're making a choice. Do you want that bonus action attack, or do you want the penalty to hit and the bonus to damage? You could have both features, and you might find tactical reasons why one or the other is better in a certain situation, but you can't combine them anymore. That brings us to number 4. While you are wielding a reach weapon you are holding in 2 hands, other creatures provoke an opportunity attack from you when they enter your reach. And finally, number 5. You gain proficiency in 3 weapons with a heavy or versatile property. And then finally, the Weapon and Shield Specialist, another iconic kind of character that didn't get a lot of love in the Players Handbook. So the prerequisite here is a proficiency in shields. You are master of fighting with a weapon and a shield. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing weapon combat while you have a shield equipped. So 6 selections here, you can choose 3 of them. Number 1, you can use a bonus action to try to shove a creature within 5 feet of you with your shield. I've removed that thing that you have to do it in combination with the attack action, and that it can only be done after the attack action is made. Now, if you want to use your bonus action, you can shove somebody with your shield. Number 2, if you aren't incapacitated, you can add your shield's armor class bonus to any dexterity saving throw you make against a spell or a harmful effect that targets only you. And if that effect would inflict half damage on a successful saving throw, you can use your reaction to take no damage instead if you succeed on the saving throw. Number 3, you are proficient in the use of a shield as an improvised weapon. The shield has the light property and inflicts 1d4 bludgeoning damage on a successful hit. Number 4, you may equip or stow a shield with the same interact with an object you use to equip or stow a weapon. This was an important one to me. Shields are very difficult. They take an action to equip. They take an action to unequip. If you are playing a weapon and shield character and you want to switch to a ranged weapon, for example, it's really hard to do so in the rules as they're written. But if you are a specialist with a shield, you can do so quickly. And it's not unrealistic. Shields, if you see how shields work, you can actually remove your hands, put in your hands quite easily. Now I'm going to make it a specialization here to be able to do it quickly, but I did think this was important to include. Number 5. Before you make a melee attack with a weapon that you are holding while wielding a shield in your other hand, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, the target of the attack has disadvantage on any attack rolls made against you until the beginning of your next turn. And finally, number 6, you gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. So the goal here was to have feats that were in a smaller list that were more comprehensive. You'll notice that the features that these feats had are pretty much copied from the Player's Handbook. I've made adjustments. I've closed a few combinations that existed before. I've allowed you to combine things that you couldn't combine before. And I've certainly boosted some things that needed boosting in my opinion. But obviously this is a major change from the Player's Handbook. These are massively different feats. Obviously I spent a fair bit of time on this. But I am happy with the selections here. This is something I would want to play with. This is something I want to DM with. I'd be excited to see now the 2-weapon specialist or the one-handed weapon specialist be effective in combat. Start to see characters that we haven't seen before. Have new players find it easier to select a feat. And no matter what feat they select, there are good options for them. So that is the end of my variant for feats. Now you might wonder what happens with the feats in other sources. And the answer is nothing. You can still use them. You can still take them. They would be used in addition to this. And then I will probably give them a similar treatment once I get to those source books. But for now, I don't see an issue using them as they are. Next week, I'm going to get into spells. And again, we're only talking about the Player's Handbook spells at first. And I'm going to begin with cantrips and work my way up to 9th level spells. Might be a separate video for each one. We'll see. But for now, it's going to be cantrips next week. And until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, have some fun. D&D's for everyone. Thanks everyone, and I hope to see you next week.